back, guys. Today we're looking at a CAPE Unit 1 Paper 2 and we're looking at the year 2018. So today we're going to go through the questions on the 2018 CAPE paper. That's for Unit 1. Now this is how the paper is organized. You have your cover sheet and then you have the cover page with the instructions. So this paper now is comprised of 4 questions. Question 2, 3 and 4, they're pulled from the modules. So there are 3 modules. The first module is question 2, the second is question 3, and the third module is question 4. Now question 1 is the map reading section. Yes, students cannot run away from map reading in geography. So the map reading section now is questions are pulled from all 3 modules. So based on what your teacher would have taught you within the 3 modules, it can come in the map reading section where you're given a map and you're asked to, for example, locate settlement. You're asked to locate rivers and tributaries. So please pay attention. I'm hoping that you paid much attention in the 3 modules that were taught. Now for this video, we're going to look at question 2. Now question 2, it basically shows us 4 population pyramids that are labeled L, M, N and P, and the first question asks that we basically tell which population pyramid is negative, rapid, slow or 0. Now the negative one is P. Now it is negative because the birth rate keeps getting smaller. So let's zoom in a bit. Good. So it is negative because the birth rate of this country is getting smaller. So the birth rate is getting smaller while the death rate is getting higher because you have more deaths than births. So we call this a negative population pyramid, meaning there is a negative growth, right? Now we talk about the rapid. L is the rapid one, and L is rapid because of the high birth rate that is in L. Now the high birth rate is associated with the number of persons in the childbearing age. Now L is also classified as an expansive pyramid. Now part 3 of the question asks about slope, and M is the slope. Now if you look at the base of the pyramid, you realize that the birth rate for each period, it continues to increase but at a very slow pace. So this is why we call it a slow population pyramid, because the birth rate is increasing, however it's increasing at a very slow pace. And then now we have the 0 population pyramid, which is at letter N. Now if we look at it, you realize that all the bars, they seem as if they line up with each other, as in there is no growth, right? So there is no positive or negative growth. Same amount of persons born, the same amount of persons that are dying. So we call this population pyramid the 0 growth. Part B of the question asks that we describe, giving an example, 2 factors that affect the birth rate of a country. So there are several factors that basically affect the birth rate of a country. So the first one we're going to look at is the age composition. Now age composition, remember we look at the population pyramid. So a country is made up of different age groups. Good. Now the fertility age group is between age 15 and 45. That's known as the childbearing age group. So the persons within that age group are classified as being fertile, and yes, they can go ahead and have children. Good. Now if you realize that the population for that country has more persons within the 15 to 45 years age group, it therefore means that they have a very high fertility rate, and this basically has the potential for the country to have a very, very high birth rate. Now if we have more elderly and more babies, so for example between 0 and 10 years of age, it means that the birth rate for that country is going to be very low, because it means that the persons in the fertility range is also low. So the more persons we have in the fertile age group, the higher the birth rate. If we have more persons in the elderly and in the younger population, it means that the birth rate of that country is going to be low. Another thing that we can look at is the sex composition. Now remember that yes, females are the ones that carry the babies, but you also need males. Now if we have a population that has 70% male and 30% female, it means that that population is going to have a very low birth rate, because at the end of the day, a female can only have a child once per year, and most time it's going to be only one child. Good. If the female is really blessed here, she will be able to have 2 or 3. And if you're really special, you can have 6, and those big numbers. However, a female can only have 1. So if you have 70% of the population being male and 30% being female, it means that this country is going to have a very low birth rate, as opposed to a country that has 70% being female and 30% being male. That country is going to have a very high birth rate. Now we'll talk about the culture and the social customs. We're talking about the culture of the people, right? So for example, in some cultures, it is deemed that women should have children. So they don't practice abortion. So once you become pregnant, you have to bring the child. Good. In some culture, they practice polygamy, meaning that a man can have many wives. Once you have many wives, it means you're going to have many children. So the culture, the social customs, right? These basically influences the birth rate as well. Now, another important thing is the status of women. Now, in today's day, the status of women have changed, as opposed to back in the days where women were basically the nurturers, the stay-at-home wives, and you take care of the children. That has changed. Now, if a woman is out every day working in the office 40 hours a week, only get Saturday, Sundays off, it therefore means that her status will basically impede the birth rate of the country, because if you look at statistics, women who actually work, they tend to have between 1 to 3 children, while stay-at-home wives, they have the lump sum of children, right? So the status of women will also influence the birth rate for the country. And we also have the policies adopted by the country. Now, there are some countries in the world who have adopted the policy that if you got pregnant, you can abort the child. So the birth rate for that country is going to be low, as opposed to a country who says, listen, birth rate is illegal, right? So if birth rate is illegal, it means that you cannot abort the child. You will be forced to bring that child. So the birth rate for that country will be significantly high, as opposed to a country who proposes that adoption is acceptable. Now, the level of education. Now, the more educated a person is, the less children the person will intend to have. The less educated a person is, the more children is proposed this person will have. So illiterate persons or persons with basic knowledge, they tend to have a lump sum or a lot of children, while the educated persons, especially the women who are working, they tend to have a smaller amount of children. So the more educated the population, the less children, so the lower the birth rate, while the more the basic the education, the higher the birth rate. Question C asks us to explain fully 3 changes that have taken place in rural areas in a more developed country that you have studied. Now, one of the rural areas that you have studied is rural England, and these are just a few of the changes that have basically taken place in rural England. Now, the first one is that rural areas are deemed agricultural, right? So they're associated with the countryside, agricultural, and a low population. Now, one of the major changes is that the population in rural England increased significantly due to counter-urbanization, meaning persons returning from the urbanized areas to the rural areas. Now, once you have the population coming back from the urban to the rural, it means that they're going to come back with what they have learned in the urban area to develop the rural area so that they can make themselves comfortable. So the first thing we're going to look at is talk about the development of infrastructures. Now, persons in the urban areas, they get up and they go to work and they drive on these pretty roads, and it is so comfortable and easy to move around in the urban areas. However, when you come back to the rural areas and they have a lot of dirt tracks, this becomes a problem. So what happened in rural England is that the infrastructure became developed. They developed the infrastructure. So what happened is that they developed the roads, they developed the bridges, they developed every little form of infrastructure to make the rural areas accessible and comfortable for its residents to basically move about. Now, after developing the infrastructures, they basically aimed at introducing the new industries. Now, remember, the rural areas were basically classified based on agricultural or the primary economic activities. Now, in rural England, these persons who will move back from the urban areas to the rural areas, they basically aided in the implementation of new industries. So you had secondary industry and the tertiary industry that came about. So they had like food processing, so they started to make jam. So when they got, for example, the guava from the trees, what they did was to develop the jam making factory within the rural area. Right now, the tertiary is that they basically started to develop bread and breakfast accommodation. They started to develop museums, recreations, right? They started to develop banks. So they started to develop the rural areas so that it was comfortable for the returning persons. They also introduced social amenities, so they implemented schools at the different levels, they implemented hospitals and clinics, they implemented all these social amenities so that they didn't have to traverse from the rural areas back to the urbanized areas, because they deemed that the urbanized area was too crowded and congested. Now, we know that in the rural areas, human labor is basically what is dominant. Now, when these persons returned to the rural areas, they increased the use of technology in the agricultural sector. So what happened was that they implemented technology. So they, instead of persons going with the pickaxe and basically digging the holes and plowing up the land, they got the machineries, the tractors and the other machineries to aid. So the work went a little bit faster. So you had less laborers and more machineries being used in the rural areas. Now, with the fact that they were trying to create an urban area within the rural areas, they basically aided in the reduction of poverty and they increased the affluence within the region. Thank you for watching this video. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and turn on your post notification bell in order to receive more videos like this. Leave comments below suggesting geographic topics that you would want me to present on. In the comment section below, comment the name of your school and the territory for a shout out in my next video. Until then, bye bye.